Greetings, young traveler. Come in and shut the door. I wouldn't want something to snatch you before I know why you stumbled upon my abode. Ah, I see. It's knowledge you seek. Well, come in, draw up a chair, and have some tea. Settle in. Make yourself at home. I shall start where my journey for knowledge started many, many long years ago, with the dwarves. But let me find that very first journal. Yes, this is the one. Okay. Let us begin. You may be forgiven for believing that the dwarves are just small, bearded men. However, this mistake could prove a costly one, as the dwarves of our home, that I like to call guildhalls, a name I shall explain in due course, are far more fascinating and deadly than the fairy tales we tell our children, the fairy tales I myself was told would have you believe. As we pass over these pages of my first journal, you will see many quizzical depictions of creatures with numerous different qualities. The simple fact for this is that these are merely my musings of what dwarves would look like based solely on those old tales I spoke of earlier. As you can tell, these tales were wildly inconsistent, as is the quality of these sketches, I must say, which led me to leave my abode to find out about these creatures I'd only heard of in the stories of my people. I'm glad I ventured out, for I now know much more of these lands that would have been lost to time. When I ventured out into the land, I did find many varied creatures that seemed to resemble the features that were common in the tales that I had been told. Now I would speculate that these are distant relatives to the dwarves. I found one peculiar little chap who I nearly classified as a dwarf due to his apparent intellect. He had somewhat of a clunky build, his movements looking slightly awkward, though I now believe him to have been some sort of semi-aquatic ambush hunter, so it's likely his frame was built for locomotion across solid ground. Now, let me find my notes on the True Dwarves. Ah yes, it was. After a month of travel, if I recall correctly, I came across a peculiar sight that led me to the True Dwarves. I remember being involved in some sort of predator's hunt. It seemed as though, in its eyes, I was part of a great herd of prey. After diving for cover, I found myself falling into a long sealed cave. I believe that this cave was some ancient living site of the early dwarven creatures. The poor fellows were clothed minimally and had a few tools of good quality. They were frozen into statues as well. Upon this first encounter, I thought that some creature had committed this horrible act. However, I now know that this phenomena is simply the process known by which dwarves turn to stone. I now have reason to believe this is due to high levels of calcium in their blood. Excuse me. So I've dubbed this process calcification. I remember hearing some deep rhythmic droning sounds towards which I trekked, eventually emerging into a cavern. Carvings covering the walls and ceiling in an unbelievably beautiful mural. I distinctly remember my eyes falling upon a group of creatures similar to those I saw previously in the cave. The creatures were chanting and carving each other's skin. Immediately they noticed me, and some armored creatures apprehended and escorted me to an empty room with nothing but a hole in it carved into the ground for me to relieve myself. Those few nights spent there were harrowing. I had no clue what my future held. Luckily, these dwarves, as I now know them to be, were hospitable, and after a few nights of incarceration, I was let free to roam their guildhall. Through conversations I had with them, I discovered that I had stumbled upon a majoritively dwarven guildhall, and that I had been apprehended due to my intrusion upon a sacred body sculpting ritual, enacted to strengthen the bond between a battle band, and create intricate and confusing patterns designed to confuse their foes. The dwarves I had seen were traveling to confront a raiding pack of orcs. Never fear, child, I will explain orcs to you in time. Upon my release from this prison, I was led to a grand subterranean hall where dwarves drank and feasted. While I couldn't indulge in their dining options, as I'm not a geolith, a term I have given to those creatures who ingest rock substances for their main source of nutrition, I did try their beer. And I must warn you, child, that their beer is not to be trifled with. The regular stuff tastes like spiced vinegar. When I took a swig from a flagon, I felt sure I would vomit, yet my constitution held barely. I did cough and splutter for the remainder of that meal, much to the chagrin of the dwarves, who seemed to show their entertainment through deep bellowing rumbles. They also have a substance, so-called nose beer, which I dare not touch. I've since discovered that it can, in fact, burn out your insides. A fact I believed was merely exaggeration, though many years later I happened to witness one facet of dwarven torture methods. Needless to say, nose beer is deadly. Oh, you want to hear more about Dwarven Biology, do you? Well, as I already said, I believe their blood to contain high quanta of calcium, among other substances, which upon death causes full calcification of the body. However, this process of calcification also occurs during life. If a dwarf's diet does not contain high enough acidic content, their bones and skin begin the process of calcification. This seems to be some sort of chronic disease for the geoliths. However, they have found many ways to use this to their advantage. For example, at times of war or battle, dwarves will forego their consumption of nose beer to harden their bodies to battle injury. Upon their successful return, they bathe in pools of nose beer in volcanic-powered hot baths. I believe it's sulfur that causes these pools to be acidic. You want to know how the dwarves even eat rocks? Well, it is a peculiar sight. Dwarves have an incredibly large, singular nostril that is normally covered by their noses and beards to prevent dust from entering their lungs when they breathe. However, the nostril is directly linked to the mouth cavity, allowing for dwarves to bring rocks into their mouth via their noses. This larger nose and mouth combined cavity also allows for their deeper rumbling vocalizations. Also, to enable their diet of rocks, they have a powerful looped tongue, which they place around the rocks and then squeeze, cracking said rocks into smaller pieces, then either using their shovel like pinkies or the tongue itself to bring the broken rocks into their nostril. Dwarven feasts are true spectacles indeed. Talking of those pinkies, Dwarven hands are incredibly large and flat, used to move around rocks and dirt and in their combat. Dwarves tend to use largely chopping motions when fighting, raining down incredibly powerful blows, their enlarged pinky protecting the rest of their hand. They use this motion to crack large boulders as well, that their tongues cannot stretch around in order to access more nutrient-rich rocks. Now I could talk at length about this child, however, it is getting late, and you at least should know that nighttime in our home is a horrifically dangerous place to find yourself in. Please do return if you wish to know more. I have plenty to tell, including more of the dwarves, with their culture, weapons and armor if that piques your interest. Until your return then, my journals are eager to be shared. Remember well, child, knowledge and memories hold power. Do not forget it.
Thank you for watching our first video introducing our new world building and TTRPG project called Guildhalls. I hope you enjoyed our redesign for the dwarves, and be sure to subscribe to follow the process of creating this world with all its unique creatures and characters, and then eventually all the game rules that will come along with it. Feedback in the comments or over on the Instagram linked in the description is always appreciated. The next video is going to be an orc redesign, but until then, have a great day.